Today on Your Voice, Your Vote, 2 days in counting, a sprint to the finish for presidential candidates, how this election differs from others.
This election has the biggest gender gap we have ever seen.
What this could mean for the outcome and the significant impact Oregon and Washington congressional races could have on the next Congress. K2 political analyst Jim Moore weighs in on the upcoming election.
Well, this is historic.
Your Voice, Your Vote starts right now.
From K2 and Willamette University, this is Your Voice, Your Vote with Steve Dunn.
Hi, everybody. Great to have you with us on this Sunday, November 3rd. Finally, the election just 2 days away. It's your voice, your vote, and your chance to determine who will be the next president. Who will have control of Congress? Who will be Portland's new mayor and city councilors? Voting taking place here at home and around much of the nation. Today from K2 and our show sponsor, Willamette University, political analysis of the races impacting you. Here to discuss, K2 political analyst Jim Moore, who will also be taking part in our election coverage on Tuesday. Jim, great to have you with us.
It's good to be with you.
As always, we got lots to talk about, let me tell you. Let's start with the presidential election. Vice President Kamala Harris, of course, and former President Trump running in an extremely tight race, at least according to the polls. How accurate are those polls, Jim, and how much attention should we really pay to them?
We should pay attention to them, but they give us indications. But the problem is the indications can only get so precise. It's just the nature of polling, this mathematics involved and things like that. And so we have this gray area, or purple, if you will, as we look at the blue and the red. And in that, we can't tell if Trump is going to win with 320 out of 270 electoral college votes, if Harris is going to win with 320 electoral college votes, or if it's going to be right down the middle. Those are all equally likely outcomes. And so that's why people are feeling what they're feeling. I'm talking to lots of Democrats and Republicans who are either really nervous or fascinating. They say, this isn't going to be a landslide? Because they're just talking to people in their own party, and that's what they're hearing. We simply don't know. So, get your coins out, start flipping them, and we'll find out.
Someone asked me the other day, who do you think is going to win president? I said, I have absolutely no idea. In past races you can say, well, I think this person will, but absolutely not now. Continue to hear that the outcome of the presidential election will come down to a small number of undecided voters. What can you tell us about the voters that still need to be won over here?
So they are kind of two main flavors, actually three main flavors. So flavor number one, you are a Trump person from the past, but his behavior is causing you to really rethink things. And so are they then going to either not vote or vote for Harris? Clearly, if you don't vote, it's kind of a half vote for Harris. Right. If you do vote for Harris, it's a full vote. And then on the other side, same kind of thing. And there it's not, what is Harris's personality? It's who is Harris? Even though she's been the vice president, people are still asking, what does she really stand for? Who is she? And so can those people then either be made to not vote or vote for Trump? And so the opposing sides are going at that. But the really rich vein is people who haven't voted in a while. You want to get them to say, this is the most important presidential election. I do need to take part, and get those people to vote. If either side does well at that, that will be the difference in those close states.
Within the last week, both presidential candidates gave their closing messages to voters, and afterwards both had to deal with some political fallout. We'll get into that. But first of all, let's hear from the candidates now. Harris held her rally in the same place where in 2021, then President Trump delivered his infamous January 6th speech. Harris telling supporters it's time to turn the page on the past.
And this election is more than just a choice between two parties and two different candidates. It is a choice about whether we have a country rooted in freedom for every American, or ruled by chaos and division.
Now let's listen to former President Trump, who gave his speech 1 week ago at Madison Square Garden in New York.
I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country, and I will bring back the American dream.
Both campaigns forced to deal with controversial statements made from other people, one of them a comedian, the other the current president. At Trump's New York rally, a comedian made a joke about Puerto Rico, calling it a floating island of garbage. What kind of impact is that having on Trump's re-election campaign?
Probably not that much, but once again, if you're one of those people who's a Trump person and you're concerned about what he says or the people around him say, this might cause you to think about that. We've seen a number of people from Puerto Rico, especially celebrities who had previously endorsed Trump, rolling back their endorsements. Now, does that make that big a difference? It could, but the big Puerto Rican communities generally tend not to be in battleground states. So it's probably not going to make that much of a difference.
Okay, in an effort to respond to the comedian's joke about Puerto Rico, President Biden called Trump supporters garbage and then backtracked and said he was talking about the hateful rhetoric as garbage. So what kind of political fallout is this having on the Harris campaign? Well,
probably the same as with the Trump campaign, not much, but harder to walk back. Remember, Biden has a history of kind of misspeaking or saying things that are pushing the boundaries. He's making a good grammatical argument that he actually meant supporter apostrophe S, talking about the comedian, but you don't hear the apostrophe S's and things. The Trump people are doing what you would exactly expect. They're basically equating it with Hillary Clinton in 2016, talking about the deplorables who supported Trump. So they're trying to use that to once again get those undecided voters to say, hey, they're talking trash about the people I support. I really do need to vote.
Former presidential candidate Republican Nikki Haley said the Trump campaign needs to look at how they're talking about women. She said it borders on edgy to the point that it's going to make women uncomfortable. And the former president said on Wednesday he's going to keep saying he will protect women, whether the women like it or not. Who are the voters that Trump is going after here?
Well, there's a very interesting phenomenon going on. A lot of states around the country have got abortion on their ballots. So it's basically measures to basically guarantee the right to abortion in some way, shape, or form. We're finding a number of women who are saying, I'm going to support that abortion measure, and I'm also going to vote for Trump. And so Trump is trying to walk a line to keep those women continuing to vote for him, but he's also then trying to reach out to males, especially the males who like the locker culture and things like that. Remember at the Republican convention, there was Hulk Hogan doing his thing, you know, that kind of stuff. Right. He's trying to keep reaching out to them with that kind of edgy humor and the edgy talk. And so he's walking a very delicate line. This election has the biggest gender gap we have ever seen. And we've had huge gender gaps going back for over 40 years. This is the biggest it's ever been. Trump is trying to chip into that to get a few more women to support him. That could make a difference.
Well, how's this playing with women voters right now?
Basically, it doesn't seem to be moving them that much. But remember, we're dealing with just a few thousand in a few states. If it moves just a few of them, that could make a difference.
Harris called Trump a fascist. Some Democrats think she needs to back off that strategy. How do you think voters respond to that?
I think it puts people back in their teams. If you're on the Harris side, you say, of course he's a fascist. In fact, Trump helps it out by saying, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. Okay? If you're on the Trump side, you say, you know, boy, that's pushing too far. This is no Adolf Hitler. This is no Benito Mussolini, if they know who Benito Mussolini is. So I think it just puts people into their teams more. Does it really suppress votes on either side? I don't think so. Fascism is just an old concept right now. I mean, basically 100 years ago, Mussolini was coming into power. That's a long time ago for us to remember political ideas and how they've had a big impact.
We are recording this interview on Thursday, hence the orange tie, by the way. But what does voter turnout to date tell you about the presidential election?
In some of the battleground states, people are really excited and they're turning in their ballots. We saw in Oregon 4 years ago that people turned in their ballots really quickly. The best hypothesis is because we were all locked in for COVID, and basically people said, great, the ballot's here, I got time, let's get this thing out. At this point in Oregon, we're seeing ballots come in kind of at a normal rate. Now, the trick is, when you look at 4 years ago in Oregon, the turnout ended up being about 82%. 8 years ago, when we did things at kind of a regular pace, it ended up being 80%. There was really no difference in the turnout in terms of percentages. So at this point, I think Oregon is kind of normal, and we're finding that in other states, California, Washington. But if you're in a battleground state, people are responding quickly and getting those ballots in. And so people are trying to figure out, is it more Republicans, more Democrats? We'll wait until they count the ballots.
Let's talk about the Electoral College. That's where the race is really won, right? Who has the advantage? Which candidate there?
Trump has a clear advantage going in because he simply has fewer Electoral College votes he needs to get. Basically, if you count them all up, it looks like Trump has about 229 Electoral College votes, 270 to win, and Harris has about 219 at this point. 270 to win. And so when you look at it, he just has 10 fewer that he has to get. He also has a little other advantage in there with the new redistricting because of the census in 2020. Republican states picked up 3 Electoral College votes. So in effect, he started out 3 ahead of where he was in 2020. Interesting, when looking at 2030, the early projections are the Republican states will pick up 6 Electoral College votes at this point. So Trump looks a little bit easier to get there, but the problem is in every single one of those battleground states, it could go either way. And they're both equally likely to get the right number of votes.
It's been a long campaign season for sure, at least it feels like it. But what has surprised you, if anything, watching all this?
I think the thing that has surprised me is the stability of people's opinion about Trump. And, you know, remember, we had Biden, and then Biden got out, and we had Harris, and the needle moved, but not very much in terms of opinion. I still think this is an election that's basically a referendum on Donald Trump. And so he's the main character. That is surprising. Here we are, you know, in 2024, Trump lost, not by a huge amount, but decisively 4 years ago. He's the standard bearer now. In 2022, he endorsed a lot of candidates, and they lost across the board. And yet people still say he's the guy, and people are still opposed to him having anything to do with the presidency, and opinion just hasn't moved at all.
Well, let's move on to key congressional races in Oregon and Southwest Washington. There's Oregon's 5th congressional district race, Republican Representative Lori Chavez-DeRemer versus Democrat State Rep Janelle Bynum, and Washington's 3rd congressional district, Democrat Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez and Republican Joe Kent. How unusual is it, Jim, to have 2 races in this area that really could impact the balance of power in the U.S. House?
It is extremely unusual. People may remember just in kind of normal elections in Washington and Oregon, if we're lucky, we have 1 race that's kind of close. But now we've got 2 and possibly a 3rd one with the Oregon 6th congressional district. There's only 25 competitive races in the entire country, 435 House seats. Only 25 of them are really competitive, and 2 in the top 5 are right here, 1 in Washington and 1 right across the river in Oregon. So it's remarkable. At some point, probably 2 years from now, I would bet 4 years from now for sure, we'll go back to the races aren't close. They're sleepy. No one pays that much attention to them. But right now, revel in it, even though if you're watching local television news, you're really, really tired of all those ads.
Oh, I'm sure they are. But you better be watching local television news, I'll tell you that. Who's got the edge in Oregon CD5 and why, Jim?
So at this point, this is based on the fundraising, because we haven't had really any good polling come out in a while, and that showed that it was really close, which we totally expected. Remember, 2 years ago, it was decided by 2%, so we're well within that range. What's happened, though, in the last 3 months? The Democrat, Janelle Bynum, has outraised Lori Chavez-DeRemer, the incumbent Republican, by 3-1. That tells me that national money is looking at this race and saying, we think the Democrat's going to win. Especially, and it's not so much the money going into Bynum's campaign, it's the lack of money going into Chavez-DeRemer's campaign. Now, there's a lot of third-party money out there. Some of the worst ads are from national groups that are just spending money. But even when you look at that, there's a big edge towards Bynum in that money. And so that says to me, I think the edge is probably with her.
What about Washington CD3 with Kent and Gluesenkamp-Perez? What do you think's happening there?
Same kind of dynamic there. Now remember, this was the same 2 candidates 2 years ago decided by a nail-bitingly small margin. We expect it to be nail-bitingly small, and yet in the past 3 months, and when you look at the totals, Gluesenkamp-Perez has outraised Kent by about 5-1. So that once again says that Republican money is saying, I don't know that we have a chance here, so it's not flooding into Kent's campaign. Whereas the Democrats are saying, we need to nail this thing down, we've got this, and the money is flowing in there.
You talked about the ads taking place now, and they really are. It seems like it's nonstop from morning until night. How much influence do you think those ads have on voters out there?
You know, at this point, not that much, but it's those marginal voters. Remember, both of these particular races were decided by razor-thin margins. So it's the same thing with finding the electoral college votes. Who out there can we get? Now, notice what the ads do. They are basically name. So you see Kent, you see Gluesenkamp-Perez, and you see Bynum, and you see Chavez the Reamer. You see those names. So when you get your ballot, you look at it and say, oh, yeah, I've seen that name before. What do I remember? People probably aren't going to remember particular messages, but they may remember, oh, that was the one where the word angry kept coming up about Kent, for instance. Or the colors were weird. Oh, I can't trust that person. It's the same dynamic that makes us buy different brands of ketchup. I mean, what's different about different ketchup? A little bit more sugar, but they all have the same number of tomatoes.
Right.
But it's the same kind of thing. How do you get people to make that choice?
I do like my ketchup.
From K2 and Willamette University, this is Your Voice, Your Vote with Steve Dunn.
And welcome back to the program on this Sunday morning. With me is K2 political analyst Jim Moore. Jim, the city of Portland getting rid of its 111-year-old commission form of government in the new year. Portlanders are voting for a new mayor and 12 new city councilors. Nearly 100 candidates actually running for city council, 19 for mayor. Who do you see as the leaders in the mayor's race?
The mayor's race, I think, clearly is Keith Wilson. I think you've got Carmen Rubio, Rene Gonzalez. Top three. And all of them have little issues with them. But remember, you get to vote for all of them. It's just kind of how you rank them. And so it's a fascinating race because usually you run to get the person's vote to switch to this person, but now you might be running for third place. And so it's a wild dynamic. But I think those three are clearly at the top.
What about Commissioner Mingus Mapps? He's been around for a while.
Yeah, Mingus Mapps running an interesting race. It's like he decided to get in, and then he looked around and said, you know, I'm not sure about this. He hasn't run a really aggressive campaign. We haven't seen him in a lot of places. He does kind of the free stuff, but he just hasn't had a really active campaign.
You mentioned some controversies. They had the one of Carmen Rubio's parking tickets, had a lot of parking tickets there, and Commissioner Rene Gonzalez using city funds to pay for edits on his Wikipedia page. Does that impact either campaign?
You know, if this were an election in the old system, absolutely. It absolutely would. Because think what happens if you're a supporter of, say, you know, Rene Gonzalez, and you hear that, do I still support him? It kind of knocks you off your game. If you're against him, then you say, oh, well, it confirmed I'm going to vote for this person. But it's not. It's a ranked choice thing.
Right.
So does it mean, you know, Carmen Rubio, that parking ticket thing, I'm worried about that, but I still think she'd be okay. I'll rank her number 4. And then that might be enough to eventually get her to win the mayor's office. So it's a very different dynamic.
Some of the mayoral candidates have participated in forums and debates, including one here on K2 last month. I'm not seeing commercials for any of these folks. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, I've noticed that. We're seeing that not very many commercials at all at the local level. There's some like on local cable outlets I'm seeing in the suburbs. But yeah, not much there. They're really knocking on doors and kind of doing the old-fashioned thing. People are also still relying on social media, but social media is pretty shallow. You know, a like is much different than, oh, I'm going to take your stuff and read it and pay attention to you, talk to you at the door. So I think a lot of it is knocking on doors. Regular old shoe leather.
You mentioned the ranked choice voting will be used for the first time in the mayor and city council races. How will that impact when voters know who wins the races?
Well, it's going to be kind of interesting. We know that Multnomah County is going to give us the results as they have them at about 8 o'clock on election night. So people will hear that and they'll go, yay! Don't go yay. Because they only have counted the ballots that have come in, and the best guess is that'll be about maybe at most 60% of the ballots. Then kind of every 24 hours, they're going to update us. So by Thursday, they usually have 90% of the ballots in. We'll have a pretty good idea. But if anything's really close, we won't. We've got to wait for all the ballots to come in. And remember, by law, you just have to have a postmark on your ballot, and it has about a week to come in. And then they'll have all the ballots, and they'll be able to tell. Really interesting in terms of how they're going to do it. Every time they do another update about what they are, they're not adding to what they did before. They're using the computer to do every single ballot from the beginning again. So every count is from 0 to everything that's come in to give you an idea of where people stand right now.
Any measures you're going to be watching closely on election night?
You know, surprisingly, Oregon has boring measures this time. I'm really interested in, there's a statewide ranked choice voting one, which has actually got some ads for it, really nothing strong against it, so I'm interested in that one. I'm interested in Measure 118, which is this second income tax on big businesses to give money to the state, to people. The reason I'm interested is there's a whole bunch of money to defeat it from grocery stores and people like that you would think would want to defeat it. I just want to see how Oregonians are feeling about this kind of tax. It's been on the ballot before. It's mislabeled as a tax on sales, a sales tax. It is not. I'm just kind of wondering where people are, because a lot of other states have that kind of tax. And as Oregon encounters tougher times, this tax has a real possibility.
Plus,
just for a historical part, Mark Hatfield, as governor, proposed exactly this kind of tax in the early 1960s. Vic Atiyeh, as governor, proposed exactly this kind of tax in the 1970s. And so, where are we on this thing?
Jim and I will be here on election night. Just 2 days away now, and so will many of my colleagues. We'll bring you election results starting at 8 p.m. on K2, along with analysis from Jim and live reports from the campaigns out there. What would you like our viewers to know about the upcoming election before we say goodbye?
Well, this is historic. You know, people are going to look back and say, so where were you in the election of 2024 for president? And you'll be able to say, I cast a ballot or I haven't cast a ballot. So that's one thing. Second thing, there are so many important races for city councils and things like that going on. That's actually the part of government that is the biggest impact on your life. School board, city councils, that kind of stuff. So voting for those is really, really important, and watching those results come in is really important.
And what are you going to be wearing on election night? What tie? Do you know?
Well, I have a choice of 3, and I haven't decided quite yet, but it's definitely going to have red and blue in it.
You're building anticipation here, Jim. That's it for us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see you tomorrow in the news, and of course, Election Day as well. Thanks for watching, folks.